Merry Christmas. It is so good to see so many of you here today. I know there's a lot watching online. I do want to say welcome home, Nathan, one of our congregational members who has been going through some illnesses and battling pneumonia and a lot of things, been in the hospital for, I feel like about 2 weeks, but was able to come home in time for Christmas. And so I just want to acknowledge that miracle. Also, I want to just give a shout out to our worship team and the hard work that they put in over these last few weeks. Jennifer has been incredibly sick these last couple of days, but she has powered through, led well. Lee and Stephanie and others have just been singing nonstop. And if you did not come to the candlelight service last night, I invite you to come to one of the two services we are having tonight. The worship team has put together some incredible music. Lowell has an incredible message. We will do communion together. So there's a lot of good things that are happening tonight at our candlelight service. But last night, it was a real blessing to me because I stood in the back and I watched two of our youth both lead us in worship. They had solo parts, and former youth, that were kids in mine and Lee's youth ministry way back in the day. And to see them as grown women married, one of them has several kids, and then another youth, former youth, his wife was up here. And having done 21 Christmases at Crossroads, it is amazing to just be a part of this family for so long and see just how God continues generation after generation to be faithful to this house. And so please come and celebrate the birth of Jesus and Christmas Eve with us tonight if you have time. So this is the last Sunday. Tomorrow is Christmas. If you have kids, you like me, my children are down to, particularly one of my children is down to how many hours and minutes are left. So I think if I hear her ask Alexa one more time, how much longer until Christmas, one of the two of them is going to be thrown out, either the child or the Alexa. I'm not sure yet, but it is. I am ready for Christmas to get here. But these last couple of weeks, we have been building up to this moment. We have been building up. Lowell has been sharing with us some perspectives about these last 3 weeks. Today is kind of part 4. And so we have been, over the last few weeks, we've been taking a look at the expectations that Mary and Joseph had and all that it took for them to get to Bethlehem. The realization of the prophecy and the miracle that the birth of Jesus and the coming of the Messiah is, and the determination that it took for the wise men to get there and their journey. And today we're going to talk about the invitation. And I think Lowell alluded in one of his sermons that ideally this would have been 3 of 4, but Lowell was really passionate about wanting to talk about the wise men, and he's the boss, and so he's like, you got shepherds. And so I was like, okay, I got shepherds. No, I actually loved the topic, and so when he approached me about it, I was like, I will gladly take the shepherds and their perspective. But so I'm going to kind of skip around, but just keep in mind that we've been kind of drawing and painting a picture moving towards and why each of these are important and how there's an expectation and there's a realization, there's an invitation, and then you and I, through the will of God and determination, get to experience the fullness of this miracle. And so today we look at the shepherds and we look at the invitation that was offered to them, and the reality of that invitation not only was extended to them, but it now is extended to us. I love the video there in the beginning. I love the skit guys. Anything the skit guys do is awesome, but I love how they can take those simple stories and make them so powerful and so meaningful. And so I want to this morning just to maybe give us a perspective that we haven't seen before, but also this is an invitation, and it's not only was it an important invitation then, but it's still an invitation to us today. Now, I talked to Bob Golden and a couple of people earlier. I'm gonna try to take the movie The Sixth Sense and make a Christmas story out of it. So just bear with me for a minute, because I want to use a good movie as an illustration. So I love good movies, and I like all kinds of movies. I've stood up here and confessed I do love a good romantic comedy. Like, I don't like a Hallmark movie, but I do like a Hope Floats movie, and I'm a hopeless romantic. I love it, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I really like are those movies, we've all seen them, like The Sixth Sense, where there's this storyline, there's this plot, and there's this expectation, and there's these truths that are being revealed throughout this entire story. And all of a sudden, there's this point in the story where there's this invitation into this reality that's been going on the entire time. But because we have developed false expectations, or because we've made assumptions, we've missed the truth of what's going on, and then all of a sudden the truth is revealed, and then the creator, the storyteller, goes back and kind of points to the whole story that's been going on, and you're going, how did I miss that? Like, it was so obvious what was going on. So you take the movie The Sixth Sense. Now, I was actually surprised. Bob had never seen the movie. It's 25 years old. There's a comedian that does a bit about this, and I love his line. Listen, it's 25 years old. If you haven't seen it now, don't tell me you were going to go home today and watch it, because it's not. And listen, I'm going to ruin it for you, and it's one of those movies that's absolutely fantastic, but once you've seen it once, you're just kind of like, there's no point in watching it again, okay? And so here's the reality of the movie. He's dead the entire time. Okay? Now, for those of us that were watching the movie, that reality was absolutely mind-blowing. Like, we had no idea the entire movie that the character was dead. But after that is revealed, and you start going back and you start flashbacking through it, he gets shot in the beginning of the movie. Right? Like, it couldn't have been more obvious what was happening in the movie all the way up to that reveal. Katie and I were watching the movie the other night called All the Old Knives, and it was kind of the same thing. Like, it's this suspenseful CIA movie, and you're trying to figure out the plot, and you're trying to figure out who's done it, and you're like, okay, it had to be Mr. Peacock in the kitchen with the knife, right? And so you're going through all this, and then all of a sudden you reach this point in the movie where you realize what's really been going on, and again, it flashes back, and you're like, it was so obvious. It was so obvious what was happening. The Christmas story for you and I, the birth of Jesus, is kind of that big reveal. See, we have the advantage of seeing the Christmas story 2,000 years later. But I want us for just a few minutes to think about what it had to have been like that Christmas, that very first Christmas. See, we've got the benefit of the life of Jesus. We got the benefit of him fulfilling all the prophecies. We've got the benefit of Paul and Peter and others writing the New Testament and expanding the church. We've got the benefit of several thousand years of seeing Jesus still do miracles and still raise people from the dead and still restore hope and still bring life and all of those. But you think about the first Christmas. God hasn't spoken in almost 400 years. But if we go back to the beginning, if we go all the way back to Genesis, we realize that one of the first things that God reveals to Adam and Eve is sin always equals death. And Adam and Eve sin, and God sacrifices an animal and clothes them wraps them in the skin of that animal. He tells the serpent, you may think you've won here, but a day is coming in which you are going to be defeated. Abraham goes up on the mountain to sacrifice his son, and God provides a lamb as a replacement. Look at the story of Exodus. The children of Israel are enslaved by the Egyptians. God does not raise up a warring army. He doesn't raise up a king. What he does is he goes and he offers Pharaoh a chance to let his people go. And when he refuses, he attacks every single one of their cultural false gods. And then he begins to undo the curses all the way up to the end, in which the curse of sin and death still exists. And the angel of death comes, but the children of Israel have been given the command to cover their threshold with the blood of the lamb, of a spotless lamb. And the angel of death passes over their threshold. And God in that moment reveals that there is a plan to overcome false gods. There's a plan to overcome curses, and there is a plan to overcome sin and death. We go on to all the prophets in the Old Testament, particularly Isaiah, who over and over and over reveals to us that there will be a Messiah, reveals to us where he'll be born, reveals to us what lineage he'll come from. God, from the beginning of Genesis all the way up until Christmas Eve, has been in plain sight telling you and I what the plan is. He hasn't left his people in the dark. He hasn't left them forsaken. From his first act of grace all the way up until now, he has been saving his people. Not because they deserved it, not because of their obedience, not because of their godliness, not because of their righteousness, but because of his faithfulness. You know, we see Mary's interaction with the messenger. We see Joseph's interaction with the messenger. We see the Christmas story. We see the birth. And we're like, oh, it makes complete sense because we have the whole picture. But keep in mind, on the night of Jesus' birth, nobody knew what was happening. It was the biggest, it was the reveal of all reveals. If you got a Bible, I'm going to be in, if you got your Bible, let's turn to Luke chapter 8. The verses will be up here, but I think if you got one, it's great to read it on your phone or in your hand. And we're going to be in chapter 2, starting in verse 8. You've heard this, probably heard this passage over and over and over, but I want to just read through this really quickly with us, and I just want to spend a few minutes kind of unpacking what this reveal would have looked like. So starting in verse 8, it says in Luke chapter 2, it says, "And there were shepherds living out in the field nearby, keeping watch over their flock at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in clothes and lying in a manger.' Suddenly, a great companion of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those whom his favor rests.' When the angel had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, 'Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about.' So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby, who was lying in a manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told to them about the child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them." Again, we see the Christmas story after the fact. We, for generations after generations, have read and been taught that the angels appeared to them. But for the shepherds, this was the first time this had happened. We have the benefit of the backstory. We understand that this is the beginning of the end, or maybe it's the end of the beginning, but this is the big twist moment. This is the big reveal. This is the invitation. This is what's going to result in the eternal reconciliation of mankind. Now, it would be easy to look at the story and go, all right, why did God reveal himself to the shepherds? He could have revealed himself, a lot of different ways. But I want to unpack a little bit for us. And there were shepherds living out in the field nearby, keeping watch over their flock at night. Now, you and I read that and we're like, okay, that makes sense. They're shepherds, they have sheep, they take their sheep out in the field, and so around the clock they just watch them. But this line is actually pretty loaded, because it would not have been common for the shepherds to have sheep in the field at night. Now, first of all, these were Bethlehem shepherds. So their primary responsibility is they were the ones that kept the temple flock. So if you remember, after the Passover, every year the children of Israel would celebrate the Passover feast. The night that Jesus was betrayed, he was celebrating the Passover feast. The Passover feast points to the ultimate lamb. All right, so these were the temple shepherds. They had the temple flock, and so their job was to protect the flock and also to identify and handpick the spotless lambs, bring them to the priest to be evaluated and assessed, to be used as the sacrifice for the Passover. So they raised and shepherded the flock that ultimately was going to be either give birth to or going to be used for the Passover. They understood exactly what the Passover was, what it represented, and its spiritual and religious significance in the culture. But it would not have been a normal practice for them to be out in the field, particularly at night, except on two occasions. Occasion number one would be when at the end of the harvest season, after all the farmers had cleared their crops and cut down everything, there would have been a lot of debris and a lot of leftovers and stalks and stuff like that out in the fields. So it would be a lot of great food and nutrients for the sheep. And so the shepherds would walk them out there at night. It would also be a cooler time. It would be towards the end of the summer. So it would be a cooler season, so they could walk them out there at night. They would keep them out there around the clock so they could eat as much, because if they don't eat it, other wild animals are going to come in. So they want the shepherds want, it's almost like kind of stored up for winter. If you've got this lush field, if you've got this opportunity for your sheep to eat and eat well, let's send them out there. And the farmers enjoyed it, because the sheep, based on the way their hooves are shaped, when they're out there walking around, particularly after the harvest, they're actually tilling up the ground. They're actually aerating and tilling up the ground. So it was a win-win for both people. Now, there were some dangers with them being out in the field at night, but that time of the season, it would be less dangerous. And if you're a shepherd, you typically would, especially if you're a lead shepherd, you wouldn't have all of your A-team out at night. You might have one or two of them, but then the younger teenagers and the up-and-coming shepherds, they would be the ones that would be out there mostly at night. You might have one or two senior guys, but that would be their purpose. Also, even during that time when they were out at night, it wasn't uncommon for them to take briars and things like that and make little round corrals. And so when it got really, really late in the night, they would kind of run the sheep into the corral, and then the shepherds would sleep in front of the gate, which is just a sidebar. That's part of the reason that later on when Jesus is talking about that, he talks about how the shepherd lays down his life, like the gate's narrow and the shepherd lays down his life. He's making reference to the shepherds would have heard that and understood, okay, at night I corral my sheep up, and then we lay in front of the gate so that nothing can get in there. All right, so that's time number one in which the shepherds may have been out in the field. But the verse is very specific. It says, and there were shepherds living out in the field, meaning that the senior shepherds were in the field. And there's really only one time in which the senior shepherds would have been out in the field. And that is during the lambing season. See, sheep typically only give birth one time a year. And when they give birth, there's a couple of reasons they'd be out in the field. This would have been kind of at the end of the rainy season. The fields would have been really, really lush and full of great vegetation for them to eat. But they were coming into the hot season. And so if you weren't careful, you would have this rainy season would produce all this lush grass, but it would burn up really, really quick. So while you've got this short window of lush fields, you want the sheep out there eating as much as they can. That's number one. Number two would be that you don't want them in a corral during the lambing season, because if they are in a stable or if they're in a corral and they give birth at night, it dramatically increases the risk that the lambs would be kicked and stomped and bruised, and therefore they would no longer be spotless. So during the lambing season, you have them out in the fields because it's the best, most lush, most opportune time for the sheep to be in the field eating. It's also the best time because they're going to give birth. And if they give birth in the field and all the shepherds are out there and you're paying close attention to what's going on, as soon as that lamb is born, they will take that lamb, listen to me, they will take that lamb, they will wrap that lamb in clothing, and then they will take it and put it in the feeding trough until the morning so they can protect it so it doesn't get trampled on, it doesn't get kicked. And so during the lambing season, the one time a year in which the lamb give birth, the shepherds are vigilantly looking for that spotless lamb, and they're going to take that spotless lamb, they're going to wrap that lamb up, and they're going to put it in a feeding trough. So this is the time in which the shepherds were in the field. It was the ideal time for them to have the sheep in the field. It was the lambing season. They had an opportunity to observe the birth and protect the sheep when it was born, the lambs when they were born. So during this one narrow window of time, by pure chance, by mathematical probability, the Messiah is born and placed, wrapped in swaddling clothing and placed in a manger. See, I just don't believe that was a mathematical probability. I believe that was a prophetic promise that for generation after generation, the Lord has been revealing his plan, and this moment is an invitation to step into the reality of what God is doing. It is not only the lambing season, it is the lambing season. And Jesus is the Lamb. It says that the angel of the Lord shone around them. The reality is that the shepherds were not the elite of their community. They had a fairly decent reputation of being flawed individuals. In fact, some research would suggest that shepherds were not allowed to testify in court. They operated off the idea that what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. They must not have been married yet. Sorry, I couldn't resist. That was not in my notes. That's a freebie. But the reality is that they were very flawed, broken, undeserving individuals. But they got it. They understood the imagery that was being unpacked before them. In that moment, it would have been like you and I watching a movie. It would have been the ultimate reveal. It would have all made sense. They would not have missed the prophecy. They would not have missed the magnificence of the reveal. They would not have missed the fact that Jesus is being born in the lambing season. They would not have missed the fact that he was wrapped in swaddling clothing. They would not have missed the fact that he was lying in a manger. And they were so moved by what they were seeing and what they were being told that they could not contain themselves. And so they accepted the invitation and they ran to see the miracle that was being revealed to them. They get it. And it says that after they shared all of this, everybody was so moved by what they were told. It says the angel had left them and had gone into the heavens, and the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. Christmas is our invitation into the reality of the story from the beginning to the end. It is the ultimate plot reveal. God lays all of his cards on the table, and he, without a doubt, lets us know that we are being set free, that he is coming to ransom us. I shared this story before. 18 and a half years ago, well, almost 19 years ago now, I met a woman and I fell in love. And man, I was so in love with this woman. And we talked about life together. We talked about our future. We talked about kids, and we talked about family, and we talked about love, and we talked about romance, and we couldn't get enough of each other. And there came a point in this relationship where I'm going, I want to spend the rest of my life with her. And so I knew what had to be done. And so we started talking about marriage. And I went to her father and I asked his permission. And Katie and I talked about what married life would be like. But then it came time to propose. And I didn't write a letter. I didn't send a text. I didn't ask Laurel to go and ask her. Because when it came to eternity, when it came for forever, it was too important. I had to go myself. And when it comes to our eternity, when it comes to our salvation, our reconciliation, it was too important. He had to come himself. Christmas is the invitation to come and see the Word that became flesh, the one that made his dwelling among us, to come and see his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth, to come and see the Word that was with God and the Word that is God, to come and see the one that was with him from the beginning, to come and see the one that by whom all things were made, to come and see the spotless Lamb that takes away the sins of the world. Merry Christmas.